Well, folks, he's back, and it seems like he's brought his favorite economic toys with him. That's right, Donald Trump is once again talking tariffs. You remember those, right? Those little economic pinpricks he seemed so fond of using during his first term? The ones that left economists scratching their heads and trade partners gnashing their teeth? For those who somehow managed to erase the trade war with China from their memories? Let's recap. Tariffs are essentially taxes on imported goods. They make those goods more expensive for consumers, which can have a ripple effect throughout the economy. Now, Trump's back with a new plan, a 10% tariff on all imports. That's right, everything. From avocados to automobiles, if it's coming into the US, it's getting slapped with a 10% surcharge. Now, the stated goal here is, of course, to protect American jobs and boost domestic manufacturing. The idea is that by making foreign goods more expensive, American consumers will be more likely to buy American-made products. But like most things in economics, it's not quite that simple. In fact, it's about as straightforward as trying to assemble IKEA furniture after a bottle of tequila. So, buckle up, buttercups, because we're about to dive deep into the wild, wacky world of tariffs and explore just what a 10% import tax could mean for America and the world. Spoiler alert, it's probably not going to be pretty. Trump's new tariff plan is about as subtle as a sledgehammer in a china shop. Forget targeted tariffs on specific goods or countries. This time, it's a blanket 10% on everything coming into the US. No exceptions. Think of it like this. Imagine walking into your favorite store and finding out that everything, from that new phone you've been eyeing to the gallon of milk in your shopping cart, suddenly costs 10% more. That's essentially what this tariff plan does. It's a price hike on a national scale, and everyone's going to feel it. The administration argues that this is necessary to protect American jobs and bring manufacturing back to the US. They claim that by making foreign goods more expensive, American companies will be more competitive, and American consumers will be more likely to buy American-made products. But critics argue that this is a simplistic view that ignores the complex realities of the global economy. They point out that tariffs are essentially a tax on American consumers, who will end up paying more for everything from clothes to cars. So is this tariff plan a bold move to revitalize American manufacturing or a recipe for economic disaster? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Remember NAFTA, the trade agreement that Trump loved to hate? Well, it's now the USMCA, and guess what? Trump's tariffs don't discriminate between old agreements and new ones. Our neighbors to the north and south, Canada and Mexico, are staring down the barrel of this 10% tariff, and let's just say they're not exactly thrilled about it. Mexico, a country whose economy is deeply intertwined with the US, is particularly vulnerable. The auto industry, a major employer in Mexico, relies heavily on exporting cars and parts to the US. A 10% tariff on those goods could send shockwaves through the Mexican economy, potentially leading to job losses and factory closures. And it's not just cars. Mexican agricultural exports, from avocados to tomatoes, are staples in American supermarkets. A tariff on these goods could mean higher grocery bills for Americans and lost revenue for Mexican farmers. Canada, too, is bracing for impact. The Canadian economy is heavily reliant on exporting natural resources to the US, including lumber, oil, and aluminum. A 10% tariff on these goods could drive up prices for American consumers and businesses while simultaneously hurting Canadian producers. The USMCA was supposed to strengthen trade relations between the three North American neighbors. But with these new tariffs, Trump risks igniting a trade war right on our doorstep. And that's not good for anyone, eh? Remember that whole trade war with China? The one that involved tit-for-tat tariffs and sent shivers through the global economy? Well, hold on to your hats, folks, because Trump's new tariff plan could be about to reignite those tensions. China, never one to back down from a trade spat, has already hinted at retaliatory measures. And let's be clear, when China retaliates, it doesn't mess around. We could be looking at tariffs on American goods, from soybeans to smartphones, which would hurt American businesses and farmers. But it's not just about direct economic retaliation. China could also choose to make life difficult for American companies operating within its borders. Think increased regulations, bureaucratic hurdles, and maybe even a healthy dose of bad press in the state-controlled media. The trade war with China was a lose-lose situation the first time around, and there's no reason to believe round two will be any different. The global economy is deeply interconnected, and disrupting trade flows between the world's two largest economies is like throwing a wrench into a finely tuned machine. So, while Trump might think he's playing economic hardball with China, he might just end up shooting himself and the rest of the world in the foot. Section 5. The price of protectionism, inflation and the consumer. Here's a fun fact. Tariffs act like a hidden tax on consumers, and Trump's 10% blanket tariff? Well, that's like hiding a rhinoceros in a bathtub. It's not exactly subtle. Think about it. When a tariff is placed on an imported good, the cost of that good goes up. And who ends up paying that extra cost? You guessed it, the American consumer. So get ready for higher prices on everything from clothes and shoes to electronics and appliances. That new iPhone? Yeah, it just got more expensive. That flat-screen TV you've been saving up for? You might need to save a little longer. And the fun doesn't stop there. These higher prices can lead to something called inflation, which is a general increase in the price of goods and services. Inflation erodes the purchasing power of your hard-earned dollars, meaning you can buy less with the same amount of money. So while the Trump administration might talk a big game about protecting American jobs, the reality is that American consumers are the ones who will be footing the bill for these tariffs. And that's a bitter pill to swallow, especially for those who are already struggling to make ends meet. Section 6. A boon or a bust. The potential impact on American jobs. The Trump administration argues that these tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs and bring manufacturing back to the U.S. The idea is that by making foreign goods more expensive, American companies will be more competitive, and American consumers will be more likely to buy American-made products. But it's not quite as simple as that. While tariffs might protect some jobs in certain industries, they can also lead to job losses in others. For example, companies that rely on imported components for their products might see their costs increase, making them less competitive and potentially leading to layoffs. Additionally, higher prices for consumer goods could lead to decreased demand, which could also result in job losses in retail and other sectors. The reality is that the impact of tariffs on American jobs is complex and difficult to predict. It's a gamble, and there's no guarantee that it will pay off. In fact, some economists argue that the negative consequences of tariffs, such as higher prices for consumers and businesses, could outweigh any potential benefits in terms of job creation. So, while the Trump administration might tout these tariffs as a win for American workers, the reality is far more nuanced. It's a gamble, and only time will tell whether it's one that pays off. Section 7. A house of cards. The fragility of global trade. The global economy is a complex and interconnected web of trade relationships. Countries rely on each other for goods and services, and this interdependence has fostered economic growth and prosperity around the world. But this globalized system is also fragile. Disruptions in one part of the world can quickly ripple outward, impacting businesses and consumers far beyond the initial point of impact. Trump's tariffs are like a wrecking ball to this delicate house of cards. By disrupting trade flows and increasing costs for businesses, these tariffs threaten to undermine the very system that has driven global economic growth for decades. The risk is that these tariffs could trigger a global trade war, with countries around the world retaliating with their own tariffs and protectionist measures. This would lead to higher prices for consumers, decreased global trade, and slower economic growth for everyone. In short, Trump's tariffs are a dangerous gamble with the global economy. The potential consequences are significant, and the risks far outweigh any potential benefits. Section 8. The world reacts, allies and adversaries respond. As you might imagine, the rest of the world isn't exactly thrilled about Trump's tariff plan. Allies are frustrated, adversaries are emboldened, and everyone's wondering what's next. The European Union, Canada, and Mexico have all condemned the tariffs and threatened retaliatory measures. Even China, which has been relatively quiet on the issue so far, is undoubtedly watching this situation closely and preparing its response. The problem is that tariffs are often seen as a zero-sum game. One country's gain is another country's loss. So, when the US imposes tariffs, other countries feel compelled to retaliate in kind. This can quickly escalate into a tit-for-tat trade war, with each country trying to outdo the other with tariffs and protectionist measures. And that's a recipe for economic disaster. Trump's tariffs have alienated allies, emboldened adversaries, and injected a great deal of uncertainty into the global economy. It's a dangerous game, and it's one that no one can win. Section 9. A gamble with the global economy. So, there you have it. Trump's 10% tariff plan is a gamble with the American economy, a gamble with the global economy, and frankly, a gamble with the patience of anyone who buys anything made outside of the US. The potential consequences are significant: higher prices for consumers, job losses in certain sectors, and the very real risk of a global trade war. And for what? The promise of bringing back manufacturing jobs that may never return? It's a risky strategy, to say the least. And while the Trump administration might try to spin it as a win for American workers, the reality is that the costs of this gamble could far outweigh any potential benefits. So, buckle up, buttercups, because we're in for a wild ride. Let's just hope this economic roller coaster doesn't completely jump the tracks. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to GeoReally channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our deep dives into geopolitics and economic trends. See you in the next video.